I'm very happy at this moment to be able to introduce our first keynote speaker, and we're very privileged to have as a speaker one of the country's great authorities on the Social Security system. Congresswoman Barbara Kennelly served 23 years in electoral office and 17 years in the United States House of Representatives. She was the first woman to serve as Chief Majority Whip, and only the third in history to serve on the Ways and Means Committee, which speaks well of her and not so well of the Ways and Means Committee. During the 105th Congress, she was the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Social Security. After serving in the Congress, she was counselor to the Commissioner of the Social Security Administration, that commissioner being my dear friend and former LBJ school colleague Ken Apfel. And she has since become the president and chief executive officer of an extremely important enterprise, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. So having said that, I just welcome you, Congresswoman Kennelly. Many thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. And I never consider myself an expert or an authority on Social Security. Having been in elective office for 23 years, I knew a little about a lot of things, but not as an expert on Social Security. But I have them in my office. I have a number of experts on Social Security and Medicare. And today I would like to talk about these important programs, not merely as budget issues, but put faces behind the numbers. The National Committee members are these faces. National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare have 3 million members and supporters. And these people come from all walks of life, of all political persuasions, but what they have in common is their absolute passion to protect Social Security and Medicare. This summer, in August, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of Social Security, and it gave us a very wonderful opportunity to reflect on the importance of this program. And I will recall to you Franklin Delano Roosevelt's words when he signed the Social Security Act. We can never insure 100% of the population against the accidents and vicissitudes of life, but we have tried to frame a law that will give some measure of protection to the average citizen and to his family against the loss, his or her family, against the loss of a job or against a poverty-ridden old age. This was a bedrock promise that President Roosevelt made. And the whole idea was after a lifetime of work, Americans would protect seniors in their retirement. Social Security was never meant to be a welfare program, certainly not, or a charity. It's an earned benefit built on twin goals of equity and adequacy. We pay in during our working years. I'm sure all of us here pay in, as I do, and we get the return when we retire. I am always amazed that people don't know how really not exactly generous are Social Security benefits. The average benefit of Social Security is $14,000. For women, it's just a little below $12,000. That's really not much to live on. But what it does is let seniors have a life of dignity and independence. Social Security really has been our nation's jewel. It's been a very important and popular program until very recently with almost everybody. It lifts half of individuals who are retired out of poverty. Family benefit is a family benefit, not just a retirement benefit. It's a family benefit whether the breadwinner has retired, died, or is disabled. And 1 out of 3 of the beneficiaries, and we don't often talk about this, are not seniors. They're either disabled or they have left their families and Social Security is needed. Social Security is the only program with an automatic cost of living increase. It keeps up with inflation, it's especially critical to the oldest of the old, mostly women who really didn't have a lot of resources. And by the time they get older, they've run out of those resources. Social Security is incredibly important to them. And those 85 and older who are really need Social Security is the fastest growing demographic in our population. I think some of you probably, knowing this audience, certainly paid attention to the Census Bureau poverty data that came out last week. We saw poverty increase for children. But what we saw was the only group to experience a decline in poverty was seniors. Now, why was this? One of the reasons is in 2009, we had an exceptionally high cost of living adjustment. 5.8% was the COLA. And that was the result of the spike in oil prices and when the formula was figured as a benefit. The other reason, the $250 stimulus bill, or the big stimulus bill that we had, included a $250 check to seniors. Now, this shows how close seniors are to poverty in that these two changes could make sure that they didn't go into poverty. And I have to tell you something. Unless the Congress acts, that we're not going to have a COLA this year or next year. And I will tell you, I don't think we're going to see a 5.8% spike as we did 2 years ago. I can't discuss Social Security without discussing Medicare. For many seniors, Medicare is their single out-of-pocket expenditure. Part B premiums are deducted from Social Security, from the check, and many seniors kind of think of these programs together. Medicare provides health care to a population shunned by the insurance companies. I represented Hartford, Connecticut, the former insurance capital of the world, for 17 years. I understand insurance, and I can tell you the insurance industry had no interest in covering seniors because they have too many claims. And insurance companies have to be responsible for profits into their shareholders. Medicare provides health insurance to a population that was shunned, and now it covers these benefits. Today's Medicare is affordable to insurance to elderly with disabilities. It uses, but having said that, and how important Medicare is, we have to remember that Medicare uses the same doctors, the same hospitals, the same MRI machines as the whole healthcare system. And a senior now spends an average of 40% of Social Security benefit on out-of-pocket expenses. We need to contain costs across the board. We can't just look at Medicare for cuts. And that's why my organization supported the health care reform bill. I have never, in all my years, seen a piece of legislation that had so much information and much of it directed to seniors. That was because seniors care so much about Social Security, Medicare, and also because seniors vote in midterm elections. And of course, many of what was going on in the health care reform had political implications. Seniors were bombarded with distortions, half-truths, and I have to tell you something, outright lies. I don't care how many times you read the health care reform legislation. You cannot find death panels. They were never there. But let me tell you, when seniors are polled, they still believe there are death panels, and this is very harmful to the program. National Committee, my organization, spent millions helping members to understand the truth, and we have no political agenda. Our membership is split 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat, and 1/3 unaffiliated. But we know that the status quo was not an option for Medicare. You just can't cut Medicare without the rest of health care being addressed. Providers, if we do, providers will withdraw from the program, and as a result, seniors will have a very difficult time finding a doctor. The Affordable Care Act was a unique opportunity to strengthen Medicare while slowing the cost of health care. And it protects access for seniors while keeping Medicare affordable. Let me tell you something. It's not a perfect bill. Most of them aren't. but it's a beginning on Medicare reform and health care reform. Those were opposed to the whole idea of health care reform. Before the ink was dry on the president's signature, they are talking repeal. Now, I will tell you right now, no matter what happens in the fall election, we're not going to have repeal because the president would not sign any veto of Social Security. But there's lots of ways to undermine this program. You can chip away at the less popular provisions, which has already begun. Small business can't stand the reporting regulations. They were absolutely hated by small business. But if we hadn't done that, or if the legislature hadn't done that, $13 billion would be lost to preventive health care. Individual mandates, those aren't popular either. In fact, they're hated by many people. But without it, the economics of the whole health care bill wouldn't work. We really have to pledge to keep some of these popular positions. And when I say pledge, I think many of you saw last week that the Republicans have a new pledge. And what it does, it includes little pieces of repeal of Medicare. It's a prohibition against insurance company rescissions and pre-existing condition denials. Very popular, but if you look at them and attack them singly, there's a chance they could pass. What you could also have to worry about is starving the program of resources. Health reform will need unbelievable, if you read the bill, an unbelievable amount of regulation. And Congress could refuse to appropriate the money for the regulation, and that could stop health care in its tracks. Many provisions don't take effect to 2014, and that's plenty of time to organize repeal activities. Those of us who believe the country is as advanced as the United States of America should have a robust social insurance program. But I have to say to you this morning, and you that care enough to come to a meeting like this, I think those of us who believe in social insurance will have to fight to keep these programs. On the 25th anniversary of Social Security, Francis Perkins, the hero, the Labor Secretary of Social Security, said, "One thing I know, Social Security is so firmly embedded in the American psychology today that no politician, no political movement, no political group could possibly destroy that act and still maintain our democratic system. It is safe. It is safe forever and for the everlasting benefit of the American people." Well, that may no longer be true. The forces are at work undermining Social Security, and they're using legitimate fear about the deficits as a weapon to undermine the program. There are those that are in very important positions that claim we can no longer afford Social Security. And as appalled as I have to tell you this, I'm appalled as anybody that we have a deficit of $1.5 trillion. I can remember when $200 billion was looked at as a real problem. And what's happening is the running surpluses at mass society deficit, we have been running surpluses in the Social Security system that has been masking the real amount of the deficits, as we well know. And what we have to know is also that Social Security has not added one thin dime to the deficits. Americans have completely, always contributed to the program and expected to have Social Security when they retire. It is a very safe retirement instrument, and the Treasury bonds are backed by the full faith and credit of the United States of America. But the problem is, the enemies of Social Security don't want to honor these. They won't say it, but they don't want to honor these bonds. Fiscal hawks' drumbeat is that we can't afford it. The truth of the matter is they don't want to honor the bonds. Policymakers may be listening. You know why? The president appointed a fiscal committee, and that fiscal committee has been moving very rapidly. Now, do we know what the fiscal committee has been suggesting? Not much, because, they have their public meetings by law, but the subcommittee meetings are held with no publicity whatsoever. So we don't know what these deliberations in secret are going to do to our program. And we have to plan what they're going to do is, and this is what we know, because we have public statements by people like Mr. Bernanke and others who are saying everything should be on the table. But the only thing that we see on the table are cuts in benefits. The Fiscal Commission won't meet again until after the election. In fact, I get a kick out of it. The date for the next meeting, I think, is November 3rd. Election day is November 2nd. Usually you're pretty tired after the election, and I don't know exactly how many people are going to attend this meeting. But what they have on the commission, a strong group of people who really don't believe in Social Security. And I'll tell you, they've made it very clear that they don't want to raise revenues. They just don't want to raise revenues. So if you don't raise revenues, you've got to cut benefits. A woman of great renown, Alice Rivlin, is on the committee, and she has always been for capping entitlements, and she's trying to talk the commission into that. Social Security, raising retirement is right there out front. Let's raise the retirement age to 70. And the reason for that is that the average life expectancy has increased. Well, sometimes averages can be shaded one way or the other. And the average life expectancy has increased for those that are healthy and wealthy. And most of those are like people who are members of the commission. And, most people would love to keep their job, but they can't. Their health isn't there, or their job isn't there. And so to increase the age to 70 without thinking about retraining, without thinking about changes in the pension law, and without thinking that we're in a recession, and we don't know how long that is going to last. But I have to tell you, this is very, very popular. And let me tell you another thing. On collecting benefits, some people have to retire early because they either don't have a job, and early retirement is 62, and they don't have a job, or their health isn't good. Well, when you take benefits at 62, your benefit is cut by 20% originally. When we raised the age to 67, the benefit was cut by 30%. And if we raise the age to 70, benefit could be cut by almost up to 40% or 40%, and that becomes a poverty wage. Another thing we hear a lot about is changing the way we index the formula of benefits. It's a complicated idea, it sounds progressive, but over the time it breaks the important link between contribution and benefits that Social Security has had for 75 years. And it could leave everybody, once again, with a poverty level benefit. I'm not one, and I really am not one, who would never support any reductions. I mean, I won't just say, don't touch it, touch everything else, but don't touch Social Security. But what I say is, when they're only talking about Social Security, I want to ask the commission, why don't we hear about anything else? And until we hear about other things, we can't have an intelligent conversation about what's going to happen. Social Security is not only important to seniors, it's clearly going to be important to our children, our grandchildren, and retirees in the future. Right now, only 1/2 the workforce has a retirement plan, a 401k, and only 1/2 of those people are putting in the maximum amount. And so what we have is a situation where Social Security will never be more important. And the members who are pushing cuts in Social Security claim that they don't want our children or our grandchildren to have this debt. Well, the fact of the matter is, our children and our grandchildren are going to need Social Security. Social Security is so special. It is no investment risk. Checks go out regardless of the market. Checks went out when we had Katrina. People had to go from Louisiana to Texas. Social Security found those people and got their checks. After 9/11, Social Security found it was there for those people who were left without the breadwinner. It was there in a matter of weeks. And the benefits keep increasing to keep up with the cost of living. And that's something we have to protect. I know that this symposium is to find solutions for budget problems. And as long as benefit cuts are all that's on the table, I don't see how we can have an intelligent conversation. We should decide what services we want and then figure out how we're going to pay for them. The commission is going backwards, picking an arbitrary funding target and then squeezing programs into it. Real disconnect, I will tell you, there's a real disconnect between fiscal hawks and the American people. The National Foundation has recently taken a poll. We didn't take the poll. We paid the University of New Hampshire, which has a very good reputation on poll taking, to take a poll. And what we saw were people who absolutely backed the Social Security program. We also saw something interesting. People are more willing to pay a higher payroll tax rather than cut benefits. And even young people who never, very blithely would say, oh, it's not going to be there. Well, millions of dollars have been spent to tell young people that Social Security isn't going to be there. For the first time, when asked this question, they worry that it's not going to be there, but they think it should be there. And we're going to have to start up a campaign again, make cutting Social Security really something that we have to protect against. And I look at you people, and so many people, even people who collect Social Security, don't understand the program. And what we have to have is people who are interested in the future of this country going around and helping us about Social Security. I, for years, have been working with Social Security. You have talked to a newspaper that had one person to cover Social Security. That's no longer true. I was on a panel with the woman that wrote, the woman that gave us Social Security. It's a wonderful book, The New Deal, excuse me, about Frances Perkins. This woman got a Nobel Peace Prize from when she was working at the Washington Post. And I said to her, why did you leave the Washington Post? We need you so definitely at this time. She said, Barbara, I couldn't stand it. She said, they're reacting now to their advertisers. And many of their advertisers are arch conservatives. And so therefore, they're very careful that they make them happy. We must preserve Social Security for future generations. And before I end, let me give you a little bit of history. In 1983, I was on the Ways and Means Committee, and we had a real problem. Because the way the formula was written and because of the inflation that had been so high the past years, we had a problem. We didn't know if those checks were going to go out. We were really worried, and we knew we had to do something. And something else was happening. We had the baby boomers coming. Now, one of the key people on the commission says, well, nobody knew the baby boomers were coming. Well, I don't know what was the matter with him because they were in their late 20s and in their 30s. And they are the ones, we raised that payroll tax, and these people worked all their lives, all their adult lives, paying into the Social Security system. And that surplus was building up, so they were really pre-funding their benefits. And we thought about it. What do you do with that surplus? What do you do with that surplus? Well, what better to do than put it in government bonds? And now we're hearing we're not going to honor those government bonds. We're hearing that Social Security is going flat broke, that the government bonds are worth nothing. Well, let me tell you something. Those are government securities. They're the same as the bonds that we sell to our international neighbors, to Citigroup, to well-off people. And I'm wondering, are they saying to us, we will honor those bonds, but not honor the bonds that people paid in month after month? I don't think so. But the difference between 83 and now is the people who were on the commission and the people who were in the House Ways and Means Committee believed in the program and were willing to work hard to make that program work. And they did. And the program since then has not only worked, it's built up the surplus. The difference is now we have people in decision-making places, and I'll name one of them because he drives me crazy, Representative Paul Ryan. He's got a roadway to fix the whole country. And one of those ways is to absolute privatize Social Security. We had that fight in 2005. I watched the president go around the country and talk about privatization. He went to 60 cities. We kept hoping he'd go to more, because every time he talked about privatization, more people realized, no, we can't do this. There were a number of reasons against privatization, but even just this idea that the transition costs would be so high that the solvency question would not be addressed. And speaking of solvency, the whole point of fixing Social Security, and our actuaries now say that the program has enough money if we honor the bonds to 2037, but after 2037 it can only pay 76%. I mean, people are acting like all of a sudden there's no workers. Money is coming into Social Security all the time. Is there a shortfall? Yes. Would I be more than willing to work hard to see that we look at the solvency issue? Yes. But what the commission says, what the executive order says, is that any savings found in this study of budget problems, any savings goes toward deficit reduction. Well, just say they raise the cap. Everybody's saying, well, that's a good way, and probably it is a more fair way. But that money wouldn't go towards Social Security. It would only make the solvency problem worse. It would go through deficit reduction. So what we have here is a real difference of opinion. And what we have here are those people who were detractors of Social Security when we began the program, remain detractors of Social Security. Nancy can tell you they were there in 1983 when we were doing the reform. And they were there, a guy named Pete Peterson, a very successful man. He made his money in an equity firm in Wall Street. And he has given his adult life. For some reason, he just can't stand Social Security. And so this year, he gave $1 billion to a group, the Peterson Foundation, to work towards solving the deficit problem, but really work hurting Social Security. So we should be worried. We really should be worried. And I believe in democracy and differences of opinion. But I also think, having studied it, looked at it, heard about it, campaigned against privatization, I also feel committed to future generations, not just today's retirees, to have a strong social insurance program. Every other developed country has. And you know, you hear things about, well, we're like Greece. Greece had the most unbelievable, favorable benefits, much, much too high. We don't have anything like that. Well, other countries are raising the age. Well, let me tell you something. France is having a big fight over raising the age from 60 to 62. We're at 67, and we're being told that maybe 70 is a good age. So what I really ask you to do is get involved. Talk to your newspapers. Talk to your Congress members. Talk to other people to explain that, yes, the deficit is terrible. Yes, the debt is terrible. But Social Security didn't cause it. And we still need Social Security now, and we're going to need it for future generations. And I thank you for coming to an event like this, because obviously you care about the future of the United States of America. Thank you. Thanks. Okay.
Time for some questions?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you so much. I love your passion and all. I am Social Security recipient and on Medicare, and I've also worked in healthcare. So I hope you don't mind if I disagree with some of your points. Number one, as for Medicare and someone who has worked in Medicare, I do not like the current Medicare reform bill. I do not believe in socialized medicine. I believe in competition. I think with Medicare, what's happened now, I am paying out of pocket because many physicians are dropping out of the Medicare plan because of the money they are not getting back. And I don't blame them. If I were in private practice for what I do, I would not be accepting Medicare nor health insurance of any kind. I think with regard to Social Security, if you want to talk to your congressman, tell them to stop wasting it and taking the money out of the Social Security Trust Fund.
I didn't hear that. Would you say that again?
Congress is taking the Social Security money out of the trust fund and spending it. They don't care. They get pensions. I don't. I took my Social Security early and continue to work. As far as increasing the Social Security retirement age, no. I don't believe in that. Death panels, forget that. When I lived in Seattle, we had a Death with Dignity initiative. It costs a lot of money. I understand how afraid people are of dealing with death with dignity, with our elderly, with our parents, with other people, having worked in healthcare at some of the top teaching hospitals in the United States. Stop using the term death panels, suicides, but there comes a point in time when we have to start talking about death. We are all going to die. And unfortunately, it costs a lot of money to keep our elderly alive who do not have a good quality of life. I know I saw that with my mother with Alzheimer's. So I think that, I guess I digress from the feeling of many people here. I am not. I'm an independent thinker. I'm fiscally conservative. I do believe Social Security will be around. My niece and nephew are in their 40s, do not, but I think people my age and younger, my age and younger, and if I want to go back to work now, I probably can. I think I don't have to give back to the government for every $2 I earn back to the federal government. But most folks now who are retiring in their 60s, unlike when Social Security was started, if my parents were still alive in their 80s, aren't depending on that. They have savings, they have Roth IRAs, they have CDs, and they are planning for their retirement. So I guess what I'm hearing from you is fear words, fear for the young folks who are here, and that we all need to have a socialized system for everything. I believe in competition. I believe in choice. And I think when it comes to health care, we need choices. Believe me, my supplement to Medicare, AARP, United Healthcare, they're going to be making out like bandits. And I haven't yet gotten my notice yet on how much my premium is going to go up in November or December, just like Blue Cross Blue Shield. There was no tort reform involved with this, healthcare reform. I do not believe in a single payer system because I've worked in the system. So I guess I hear from you a lot of fear rather than some constructive ways. I think the payroll tax should be deducted for 2 years to get this budget deficit under control. You may not like what conservatives or diehard Republicans, and I don't know where I fall in the line. I'm obviously not a failed liberal anymore. I've gotten older. But that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear my nephew and niece, it's going to be there. Social Security's not dying. But tell your Congress people, stop raiding the trust fund, because they are. And let's have choice and competition when it comes to health care, because that will keep the costs down. So I thank you, and that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, talk to Congress. What do they care? They're covered. They got good pensions, and we're paying 70% of their health care benefits. I'm paying 70% towards every federal employee and Congress's health care. My question, what would you say to all that?
Well, first of all, I'm glad we agree on not raising the age to 70. We agree on that. And I want to tell you something. I don't have fear. At my age, you don't have fear. I have 4 children, 10 grandchildren. I fear for them, maybe. But I am trying to express a feeling that any country worth its salt should have a social insurance program. And you're lucky, that you're a very bright woman, and you can articulate what you feel. And that's America. That's democracy. We all have different opinions. But I have to tell you, I sincerely feel that Social Security is very important to the future of this country and to our future citizens. Sir.
Yeah, I have a question. I agree with you completely. Social Security is a spectacular success, potentially the greatest social program ever put in place in this country. Needs to be protected, and I commend you for that. My fear is, and it continues to enjoy widespread support because, and I think you articulated this, because people don't see it as a welfare program. They pay in, right? And it's a compact between the generations, but people pay in and they expect to get out when they retire. My fear is that that could be undermined by some of the ideas to address the solvency issue that are coming from the left. So raising the cap, making it more progressive, even means testing. You put these in place and it starts to resemble a welfare program. And as we know, these are very unpopular. And then you erode the support for this fantastic program. What do you think about that idea of maintaining the idea that it is a fair program, it's a pension program for everyone, and not a welfare program?
Well, that's exactly how I feel. And, maybe I do show too much passion, but having been around this program for a number of years, I have seen firsthand how important it is to people, and how the benefit is really kind of meager, but people need it for their dignity and to live independently. And I just want to address this woman's comment about the Congress spending the money. There was no doubt that Congress took the surplus, borrowed it, and really masked how big the deficit really was. But that's how we got the bonds. When the money went out to pay for other things, we got government bonds. And my contention is that we honor those government bonds. Maybe we should have had remember Gore and he wanted a lockbox? Maybe we should have had a lockbox. But that idea just doesn't go, after Gore, it just doesn't go anywhere. But, I agree with you. I know exactly what happened. But we have to honor those bonds. We owe that to the people of the United States of America. And, I see my members. And my members are old. And I see how they're dependent on Social Security. And I can't imagine if they didn't have it, they'd be in poverty. We'd have half the seniors in this country in poverty. Social Security keeps these people from being in poverty. And as I said, gives them dignity and independence. But nothing wrong with disagreeing. What? Oh, no. See, that's the interesting thing, and that's what I saw in the privatization battle. Everybody, even Paul Ryan says, nobody's going to be affected 55 and older. That's not my worry. But if you're a woman who has a number of children, or one child, and that child has children of their own, and things haven't been going too well, the business went bad, a child got sick, that daughter, who's maybe 50 now, is going to need Social Security when she gets to Social Security age. So that's where I'm coming from. Sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Joe Freeman. I'm a senior scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Since you have Medicare and Social Security under your purview, I'd like to ask you about the slight disconnect that has occurred between those two now that we've raised the age for full Social Security benefits, since you said to 67, but you're eligible for Medicare at 65. Now, it has been common to pay the Medicare premium out of the Social Security premium, which worked just fine when they both happened at the same age. But now that's, to get the full benefits, you have to hold off for 2 years, and it may be more in the future. People who are eligible for Medicare at 65 have to pay the premium out of their own personal funds, which, if they have also retired at 65, are probably gone down, and they may not necessarily been able to afford it. Has your committee, or is anyone considering what to do about this disconnection so that there might be some way to get the Medicare premium paid without having to dip into their lesser income until they're eligible for full Social Security?
Well, that's kind of the point. Many people, when they get to be 62 and older or 65 and older, some of them have savings, and some of them have investments, but a lot of them depend on Social Security. So where are you going to pay your premiums from other than the Social Security? And what is happening, we're getting to a crisis stage, because Social Security now, many people are paying 40% of their Social Security for Medicare. And that's beyond the beyond. And that's why I insist that we had to do health care reform. Because if you don't reform the whole system, and what I constantly say is, we don't have a problem with Social Security. We have a problem with health care. And so we've got to reform the system of health care across the board. Because the option of just not doing the system, what's left? What's left for people to look at? Medicare. And that'll take all the hit. And then we really have got a problem. What?
We got time for one more. Yeah.
Were you talking, this woman here is telling me you were talking about Part A? Well, Part B is taken out of the Social Security check. Yes, it is. Only if you were at a certain income. Only, okay. I'm paying more, too. Yeah.
I guess we're, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Congresswoman Kennelly. And in keeping with the